This week, can you buy a used EV from another part of the country and save big? The answer will surprise you, especially if you think the answer is no.
The Super Bowl once again featured numerous electric vehicle ads. According to sources close to the matter, a football game was also played.
Electric vehicle sales top $1 trillion in wake-up call to automakers.
Correction, you mean Japanese automakers.
Arigato.
Ice arenas around the world are getting cleaner indoor air thanks to the electric Zamboni. Interestingly, the electric Zamboni was also the name of my first prog rock band.
Plus, how methane gas leaking from offshore oil rigs may be causing helicopters to fall out of the sky. That's not funny. I'm smiled there, but it's not funny. People actually die in these things because of methane leaks. You know, no one dies when I fart. All that and more on this week's edition of the Clean Energy Show. Brian, did you watch the Super Bowl?
No, I did not.
Why not?
I don't think I've ever watched the Super Bowl. Why would I do that?
For the commercials?
Yeah, I guess I've watched sometimes for the commercials, sometimes for the halftime show. I'm not, really into American football, so it never really occurs to me to watch. But of course, you can just find the commercials afterwards on the internet. So.
Brian, more and more people north of the border are getting into the NFL. There's statistics that the NFL the games are way out, ratings-wise, the Canadian Football League.
And for our non-Canadian listeners, we have our own football league here, the Canadian Football League. There's lots of very passionate fans, but of course, it's kind of small potato compared to the NFL with, millions of dollars in salaries and everything. It's a much smaller league, but it always makes me a little bit sad when the CFL gets overshadowed by the NFL. But what are you going to do?
There's nothing you can do. It's happening, and that's why the NFL didn't want to go to Toronto, because it would have killed the Canadian Football League, and it would have killed football in Canada.
Toronto's been trying to get an NFL franchise, but that would be maybe the death knell for us. So
and we built a stadium here that we haven't paid for another 30 years in our town for the CFL, and I said at the time, the CFL, we don't know it's going to be around. The world's changing fast. Is the CFL even going to be not bankrupt by then? And the league just took ownership of one of the franchises in Montreal. So that's today. Brian, if you had watched the Super Bowl, not only would you have seen a scintillating performance by Rihanna during the halftime show, and it's interesting that they suspended her on platforms. That was quite stunning visuals in the middle of the stadium. But they had to do it that way because the turf couldn't get compressed. It was delicate turf. I've actually been to the stadium. It's in Arizona
oh, really?
In a suburb of Phoenix. Yeah, my son said, well, we're here anyway. We were going to your stupid camping store, Superstore, so let's go check out this NFL stadium. So we sat there in the parking lot and had a look. A lot more busier on Sunday than it was when we were there.
Yeah.
But had you watched the show, you would have seen this clip from television.
Well, you've got some brilliant minds in that photo. Rupert Murdoch, Elizabeth Murdoch, Elon Musk. Rupert pays our checks, too, so that's always good. But, everyone taking in Super Bowl 57.
Yeah. Elon Musk sitting with Rupert Murdoch.
I get there's a Murdoch on the board of Tesla, I think.
Is there? No, not Rupert. Not the not the disseminator of hate in the world.
Like his son or something.
Yeah, the good son. James Murdoch. All good sons are named James. Do you hear that, Mom? And then what did you think? The Super Bowl ads for EVs were way down this year.
Yeah.
There was, I don't know how many there was last year. There must have been 8. Yeah. And you know what happened last year with a whole bunch of EV ads? Not by Tesla, because Tesla doesn't advertise. A bunch of orders came in for Teslas. They spiked after the Super Bowl. Yeah.
Because this is a year ago, and the offerings from these car makers in terms of electric vehicles was very, very slim. Even if you wanted to buy an electric from one of the companies that advertised, it would have been hard to do at long waiting lists, etc. But of course, you can order a Tesla because they make lots of them. So I don't know, maybe that's why they cut back on their ads this year. But yeah, there was only 3 or 4 electric car ads this year, I think.
Yeah, and the car ads were way down. Like overall car ads in general were way down for some reason.
Yeah, that's normally a very big advertiser on the Super Bowl, but yeah, not this time.
Yeah, and here's one of the ads that they have was typical Super Bowl ads where you can't really buy the thing for a couple of years. You're just kind of saying, hey, our brand is cool and progressive and we're going to be better than everyone else. You just have to take our word for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Dodge Ram Rev electric pickup truck is coming out, and I'm going to play you the whole damn ad. Not because it's my favorite, but because it works well on podcasts, and I thought it's interesting. It's kind of funny.
About buying an electric vehicle, but worried that it could leave you unsatisfied? Then you could be one of many Americans concerned about premature electrification. Symptoms may include fearing you might not be able to last as long as you'd like.
There was plenty of charge before, and sometimes it goes away.
A lot of times.
I've been working a lot.
Being unsure if you'll have enough power to handle your payload.
I don't know if I got the power for this, baby.
I'm adventurous. I like to go all the way. I don't want to have to question if we're even going to make it.
Yeah.
It's a concern.
Lacking the confidence about getting and being able to keep a charge.
Having to stop every time we got really excited, that wouldn't work for me. Stop. Start. Stop. Start.
If PE, premature electrification, is something you're worried about, go to ramrev.com and find out if the Ram 1500 Rev, with options being designed to extend range in satisfying ways, is right for you.
Stop. Start. Stop. Start.
Yeah, and they can send me a free pickup truck for playing that. I think I deserve that.
Well, the ad rates are a little bit lower on our program.
They
than
are.
on the Super Bowl.
We sometimes compare it to the Super Bowl or consider the Super Bowl a podcast, I think. A lot of people say that.
Yeah. So, but the star of that ad, Jason Jones, a fellow Canadian.
Is he?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what did you think of the ad? As an advertising expert, as a media professional? Yeah, you didn't like it.
It's
close
all
to
right.
home?
And I guess now, as opposed to last year when there were all these ads for electric cars that you could not buy, this is an ad for another electric car, a pickup truck that you cannot buy. This is coming out in 2 years. So I guess it's kind of clever because they're trying to get around the fact that you can't actually buy it by, warning people not to get too excited too quickly, something like that.
Well, I think it's interesting because electric pickup trucks are geared towards men, and this is kind of making fun of the emasculate nature of EVs, that the reputation they have among pickup driving men. So maybe that's trying to address that. I don't know. It's funny enough. I mean, it's kind of, cutting edge because it's sexual. Everything is sexual. Mm-hmm. And the Super Bowl is a family show.
But this, it's two years away, I think.
Yeah, at least. So also, there was the anti-Tesla ad that didn't play nationally, so you can't really call it a Super Bowl ad. But there are local spots for the Super Bowl, and he bought them in several state capitals. This is a guy, I forget his name. It doesn't matter his name. I don't want to repeat his name. But he's going against, have you heard about this? The full self-driving beta? He's just on a tear. He ran for Congress from California with one issue, to ban full self-driving beta on Teslas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he's gathered all this money. And also Jesus was big. Apparently we don't get to see the ads in Canada. It was so frustrating. We saw very few ads. Well, you didn't watch it, but everyone else in the world, the 99% rest of us, didn't see any Super Bowl ads because they don't show them. We've got a simulcast in Canada where they're replaced with Canadian ads, mostly.
I thought they had changed that a couple of years ago.
A few years ago, they changed it for a couple of years, and the regulatory
changed it back.
They got lobbied by, because you couldn't make any money, and so that was a good couple of years. I mean, you go to YouTube. They release the ads early now, right? The week leading up to get the most buzz. Now, the other big ad was Will Ferrell talking about GM EVs and Netflix, because Netflix. Well, I'll let him speak for himself. Will.
General Motors is going electric, and Netflix is joining in by including more EVs in their movies and shows. It's the least they can do.
So if you're going to get swarmed by an army of the dead, why not get swarmed in an EV?
No! I said no biting!
Yeah. It was a big, but it doesn't work on podcasts. But it was a big budget
Yeah.
where Will sort of walks through different Netflix worlds, like Stranger Things, for example. He's in, world with zombies and everything else. And
Squid Game.
Squid Game was a good one. Yeah, so he's in all those worlds with some of those actors. And so Netflix is apparently featuring EVs in Netflix productions. As a movie producer and director, what do you think of that?
Well, I assume this is a paid promotion type of thing. So General Motors, like product placement in movies is fairly common. So apparently General Motors has decided to give a bunch of money to Netflix to feature the cars in the shows, which is a thing.
You don't think it's just a sort of greenwashing thing that we're going to put EVs on our programming and encourage people to do that? Or is it a product?
No, I think it's just product placement. I mean, I don't think Netflix would do this for free. I'm assuming they're not doing it for free. So it's just another form of advertising.
They're just saying, hey, they're advertising that we're going to do product placement and you should be happy.
I mean, it's a bit weird to make it a Super Bowl ad, but I don't know if you remember, like back in the 70s, Universal Studios had a deal with Ford. So every Universal Studios movie and TV show always had tons of Ford cars in it. It's a similar kind of deal.
Okay, that was probably one of my favorite Super Bowl ads, but my favorite one was Doritos one with Breaking Bad. Have you seen that one? Are you a Breaking Bad fan?
Yeah, I've seen it, yep.
Well, it was a very good commercial. One of the best commercials I've ever seen in my life, I think. It was very well done.
Nice.
And, last year, the Silverado EV was featured in the Super Bowl, and they did David Chase remade the Sopranos opening with the theme music to the Sopranos on HBO.
Right.
And I watched it again. It's very effective because it's Tony Soprano's daughter is driving the EV, and she meets up with her brother and hugs them, and they're all cool, and they plug it in, and everybody's happy, and it's a new generation. That's the theme of the commercial, and I thought it was very effective.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, well, let's move on to a different type of electric vehicle. That is, of course, the electric Zamboni, which we may have even mentioned on the show a while ago. This is not a new thing, but a Zamboni, of course, is a machine for resurfacing the ice in arenas, ice arenas.
Brian, as a hockey expert, what does the Zamboni do? Does it heat? Does it melt? Does it pour water? Is it scrape? Does it brush?
There's a scraping mechanism that scrapes off a layer of ice and scoops it up. And then another thing that
There's a lot of slush when people skate around, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a Slurpee on top.
Yeah, so it sort of sweeps up all of the snow and scrapes it a little bit and then puts down a fresh layer of water. And then it's got a nice cloth at the back and it freezes it. And, there's always a cloth to keep the level of the water even.
Oh, I was going to build my own Zamboni machine when I was a kid because I had a skating rink one year. And I really wanted one.
Well, there are people that have...
I was going to invent it, Brian. I was going to sit there and invent it. I didn't know what they did, though.
There's people that have backyard units. Like if you've got a backyard where it's kind of like a wheelbarrow that, it's got a hole in the bottom and a cloth behind it. You can kind of make your own.
Oh, well, nobody told me that. There was no internet back when I was a kid.
In fact, you could probably even buy one on Amazon. I mean, we should have a look at it.
Yeah, we couldn't.
But anyway, Zamboni, it's a brand name. Named after the guy who invented these machines, and they've been around for a long time. But the downside of the Zamboni is, of course, they've been fossil fuel powered for all of their existence.
Now, it's not diesel, is it? It's propane or natural gas?
It's either propane or gasoline. And I think that all the Zambonis from when I was a kid, I think those all ran on gasoline. But, I have very distinct memories because I played hockey as a kid and, there's these neighborhood rinks and they're not very big. Like if it's an NHL arena, it's kind of one thing because you've got this gasoline powered thing driving around and there's kind of lots of more airspace to absorb the fumes. But a local hockey rink, they're very small. And, even as a kid, I remember thinking, gee, should we be doing this? Should we be basically running a car indoors?
You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to start the car in the garage.
Like everybody knows that. You don't run the car in the garage with the door closed. So it always stank. Like it was always a terrible smell. Like you're in a building with exhaust fumes. So of course, an electric Zamboni now exists. People are starting to buy them. There's about 400 of them now. in operation. But there's a couple of stories here from CBC and from Electrek about this issue, and Health Canada had been doing some studies about this, and they did this.
Interesting.
Partly in Saskatchewan. They studied all of these rinks where we are, James and I.
This is where we are, Ken.
Are in Saskatchewan.
Don't ask where it is or try how to pronounce it, but that's where we're coming from.
And then I think Ontario, they studied some rinks as well. And by and large, they found that the pollution levels were acceptable, like 50 parts per million of carbon monoxide. You got to be under that. So by and large, it's still, of course, unpleasant. And I think if you're sensitive, if you have asthma or something, I think you could easily be triggered by just even the acceptable levels of pollution in these rinks. But there has been some incidences here. Let me just find so this is from Electrek. So there have been terrible incidences in the past of the pollution getting out of control on these things. So, for example, parents and students were evacuated from a hockey game in Tupper Lake, New York, after the Tupper Lake Volunteer Fire Department chief determined carbon monoxide levels were above the 50 parts per million. According to the current occupational health and safety, the limit is 50 parts per million within 8 hours. So the culprit in this case in Tupper Lake was determined to be a 1972 Zamboni, a very, very old Zamboni that they were still using.
Well, I bet they don't replace them. I mean, it's not like hockey rinks in small towns and different places have the money to just go buy another one. So it's been around since the heyday of whenever they had some extra money.
Although the really small towns around here, I think they all still do it by hand, right? With shovels and and just a hose.
Oh, boy.
We have very small towns here that have rinks. Actually, there was a clip went viral recently on Twitter of one of the hockey rinks in Saskatchewan here. And the players, it was built in around like 1915 or something. And it's one of the oldest hockey rinks in the world. And the players have to come down like a drawbridge onto the ice.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was a very funny clip that went viral where...
It's weird.
It's very weird. The dressing rooms are up.
The dressing room's on the second floor for some reason.
So to get out onto the ice, there's this drawbridge of stairs that's weighted, and you walk on it, and then it lowers down and onto the ice. And there was a very funny clip of somebody almost falling off of this thing. So, this is what we're dealing with around here. But, hockey rinks are very important to life in these small towns. So there's been, incidences here. There was another one here. People sometimes end up in the hospital because the pollution is so bad in these. There was another incident where, several kids were sent to the hospital. One kid had to be put on oxygen because this got so bad.
But it's not like they're tuning these up and taking them to the DMV for pollution checks.
No, I assume there's no regulations at all. So when Health Canada was kind of testing this, testing all these arenas, they sort of looked at two things, which was better ventilation, which obviously they should have, and of course switching to electric Zambonis. And they found that the ventilation didn't always work. It kind of depended on the building. That obviously you can improve the ventilation probably in any building, but it just worked better in some rinks than some others. So they came to the conclusion that electric Zambonis is really the only answer for this. So it's going to take a while to
it's too bad they're so much more expensive. It says you have $50,000 more?
Yeah, it's about $50,000 for an electric Zamboni. The other ones are a lot cheaper, but it's like pretty much everything we talk about on this show. It costs more up front, but it ends up to be cheaper in the long run. You don't have to pay for gas. You don't have to pay for oil changes, spark plugs, all that kind of thing. This is a thing that'll happen slowly.
8 years it'll break even, they say. You know what? The federal government shouldn't subsidize this because it's not going to take a lot of carbon pollution out of the air. But they could maybe help the rinks get there just for health reasons. You could give loans to rinks maybe or something like that.
No, and every country's always struggling with the cost of healthcare, right? Healthcare is very expensive. And we should be looking at more things that are preventative. If the rinks have clean air, you won't have a kid in the hospital on oxygen.
Yeah, and as I've said in recent weeks, something like 7 to 8 million people die every year in the world because of car pollution and truck pollution. And if we can fix that, well, Why wouldn't we? You know, like that's a lot of people. That is, you know, if you picture it, it's just depressing to think that many people when we have a solution. You know, we have the solution. Let's get on it. Toronto puts Zambonis on ice. That's the headline from Wired in 2008. They had a story about electric Zamboni. But was it lithium ion back then? Was it nickel or lead acid batteries, perhaps? Yeah, I'm surprised, Brian. It's just the battery that makes it different. I mean, really, you would think it wouldn't be that much more expensive, really. I mean,
you know, they probably should have been electric from the beginning because, yeah, you could do it with a raft of like 6 or 7 or 8 car batteries because it only has to run for about 15 minutes. That's what it takes to clean the ice, and then it can go back and charge. So, you know, old Zem.
But no, let's put a combustion vehicle indoors and bring all the kids from the village in and expose them to it.
You know, Mr. Zamboni was a genius for inventing this machine, but, you know, he probably should have gone electric from the start.
Right. Well, guess what? David from our local EV community rented a Tesla from Hertz during a layover in Toronto, like a one-day layover. Now, we've been talking about Hertz getting electric vehicles for a long time, and we've been talking about how maybe they'd be more expensive, but he only paid $53 Canadian plus taxes. Now, that might seem expensive to you guys in the States, but for a rental vehicle, that's pretty good, isn't it?
No, that's decent.
In Canada?
You know, prices tend to go up and down depending on demand, but yeah, that seems good to me.
Depending on what day it is. Yeah, so he rented a Tesla Model 3 standard range for $53 plus taxes for the day, which is a great way to, he wanted to test it out too, right? He wanted to test drive because he didn't own one. And he says it was a great experience, except check the paperwork for how much the battery charge has. Ours only had 80%. Well, that's what I would expect it to have, because you don't want to leave a car sitting around your Hertz lot at more than 80%. You could potentially damage.
They probably charged it to 90. It sat there for a bit and went down to 80, something like that.
Yeah, you don't charge cars to 100% and leave them. You have to use them. On a plus side, he says it didn't cost us anything for charging, because we took it back with more than 10%. So that's something I'm learning here. If you take it back with more than 10% charge, you don't get charged.
But check the paperwork, because it may be different from different car rental places.
But Hertz is the company that's going big, and they're getting, this is from Ars Technica. Despite falling short of his electrification efforts in 2022, the big announcements they made, Hertz plans to continue adding Teslas, Polestars, and Chevy Bolts, which surprises me because they're a bit on the small side, to its fleet as it eyes a 25% benchmark by 2024. And that's only next year to be 1 in 4. That's going to take off. That's a lot of cars. That's a good news story. And the fact that you can, they can fuel it right at the rental place. They don't have to, it's an empty tank. We got to send somebody to go fill it up somewhere.
No, and there's been stories of Hertz building supercharger stations. They probably already have level 2 chargers at their locations, but they're also adding the super fast superchargers as well. So, it's a no-brainer. Eventually, it'll be a very normal thing to be just renting an electric car.
Okay.
So, story here from Ontario. I feel like we're heavy on Canadian news this week. Talk about the Canadian Football League. But
Go Riders or Go Riders.
Yeah.
There was every Canadian from who's in Hollywood always mentions that our team had 9 teams, or our league had 9 teams, and 2 of them were called the Rough Riders. 2 of them were called
the Rough Riders. Yes, one of them is now defunct.
Never made sense to me.
So,
thank God. Because we were one of them.
Yes, we were one of them. But so in Ontario, they're putting in 1 gigawatt of grid storage in Ontario. They're doing it with the Tesla.
Brian, that's a lot.
1 gigawatt. This is one of the largest battery installations in the world. And it's for balancing off the grid in Ontario to supply more energy at peak times. But 1 gigawatt, they're using the Tesla Megapacks, which are the large batteries that are kind of like in a shipping container. But it's going to take a lot of those suckers. And Tesla's Megapacks are kind of sold out for the next 2 years. They have so much interest in these things. And 1 gigawatt that's taken a lot of their supply for sure.
It's a gigawatt for an hour. So that's a nuclear reactor for an hour in
terms of
what people say.
Approximate.
What people say batteries can't do things. Yeah. It's hard to wrap your head around it. I know. Yeah. I know that. But this is a nuclear reactor running for an hour off of batteries. Yeah. Batteries.
Yeah.
And the batteries are expensive now. And in 10 years, 15 years, a lot cheaper because we're going to be making so many of them.
And of course, it won't typically run for a gigawatt at an hour. It'll, ramp up. It'll ramp down at peak times, like 5 p.m. is the peak time. It'll add more to the grid, and then it'll charge up the batteries at night when there's less demand, et cetera, et cetera. These are a no-brainer for grids. It's just going to be one of the biggest things in the next few years in clean energy.
Absolutely, and it's going to ramp up as fast as they can possibly make them. And right now, it's expensive, but to have batteries on the grid, you save a lot of money. Like in Australia, they've shown that you could save millions in a year by having batteries on the grid, just because you're balancing the grid, you're preventing equipment from going down when you need a quick jolt of extra juice into the grid. It can respond within milliseconds, unlike anything else. It's cheaper than peaker plants, and it saves you more money than peaker plants because they can do so much more.
And we mentioned on the show a couple of months ago, there's a couple of sort of pilot projects for virtual power plants, virtual battery storage. They had a big one in California. So all the Tesla Powerwalls in California could sign up for this virtual power plant pilot program. And basically the central computer can draw from all of these different batteries in different people's houses across the state and do the same thing as the grid storage battery that we're talking about. Maybe not as big, I'm not sure. But there's a story here from Electrek. So this is the first year of this is completed. And the people who put their batteries into this program made about $500 each. So you can, this
for doing nothing. I mean, because you already had the battery, you just signed up for it. I mean, your battery gets used a bit more, but it's actually not that much.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they didn't use your battery that much. They used it, mostly in the summer during peak heating times. That's when the stats were showing that they used it the most. But they didn't drain it and fill it and drain it and fill it. They're not like wearing it down that much. They're just relying on it as the backup, and it saved them money to do it. And it paid people well.
Yeah, just every once in a while. And Brian Wong, I've mentioned before, is a guy I went to high school with, and he has a blog called Next Big Future, and he lives in California. And he wrote a little post here. He made $426. He was part of this program. So, money in your pocket.
And keep in mind, you'll be able to do this with your car, your truck, your electric vehicle.
Yeah.
With vehicle to grid, two-way charging. And that's exciting too. And that seems to be becoming more and more popular, more and more mainstream.
And make the grid more reliable. We've had a couple of power outages here lately at the house. It's been annoying. And eventually, this will make the grid more reliable.
Yeah. And I think that's the future grid. What it's going to look like is a lot of distributed power, a lot of distributed solar, and a lot of distributed batteries in our homes. So we're all going to be part of the grid if you want to be, and it'd be stupid not to. Brian, I've got a new segment for you called EV Questions. There's no intro for it, so don't get excited. But sometimes on the internet and in different places and in our emails, we get questions about EVs because people, it's a naive question that we have this week. But a lot of them are, and that's fine. So let's answer them because a lot of our listeners are new EV owners or about to be one of those people. The question is this: I just got an ID4. What's the best way to go through the car wash with an ID4? What functions should be turned off? It's almost laughable. The first answer to your question, sir, is roll up the windows. That's very important, Brian, because, I think one time I didn't.
So these are instructions that you need.
These are instructions with your electric car. Roll up the windows. The only thing that's different than a normal car, a gas car, is I would say practice putting it into neutral if you're at one of those car washes that pulls you, because people generally don't put their car in neutral. There's no reason for it.
No, on electric, I don't know how to do it in my car.
What?
No, I don't. I don't remember.
What kind of car washes do you go to?
Well, I go to the co-op one. I was actually there today, as a matter of fact. I got a car wash today. But
did it pull you?
No, it doesn't pull you. You just drive in. But
Oh,
and
okay.
that's my preferred one.
Oh, yeah. I've got one of those here. We use that kind.
Yeah, so you don't get pulled through, so I don't need to know how to go into neutral. But if it's one of the
there is another co-op
automatic ones.
There is another co-op one that I went to with my Leaf and lost the hubcap.
Yeah.
And I came back later that night, and the guy says, "Here you go." Yeah, but yeah, the ones that pull you have to put it in the neutral, right? And it's pretty straightforward in a normal car because you're doing different shifts. In some EVs, it's a bit tricky. You have to finesse the button because you never do it. So I would say, look at your owner's manual. Learn if you're in one of those kind of car washes, learn how to put it in neutral.
And the Tesla has a car wash mode, which is what I used today. And because it was one of those car washes where you just drive in, it doesn't really do that much. It just makes sure your windows are up. But then on the screen for car wash mode, there is a button it says free roll. So instead of
free roll, baby,
instead of going into neutral, which I forget how to do, I could go into car wash mode and press the free roll button.
That's the nice thing about Teslas. They got a mode for everything. They've got dog mode.
Yeah. And
no cat mode yet,
the
but
car
they're working
didn't
on it.
have car wash mode when I bought it, and
now it has
it.
Value added.
Yeah.
What did you pay for that? Nothing. Came in the mail. Came over the internet. So if you have any questions about EVs, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com or speakpipe.com if you'd like to leave us a message, speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. Let's move on.
Yeah, so British Petroleum just announced that it will join Shell in slowing its transition to clean energy. The company plans to use record profits from 2022 to invest an additional $8 billion in fossil fuels.
Let me just say this. Boo!
Yes. BP also plans to aim for 20% carbon reductions by 2030 versus its original 40% target. So a lot of...
Brian, do their CEOs stroke cats and contemplate evil? I mean, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Like how?
And it seems like all the major oil companies have recently backtracked a bit on all of their clean energy plans. I mean, at least they're admitting that they're backtracking. I don't know. Is that something?
Yeah, that's one thing. We'll give them credit for that. You know, people go buy an EV. You know, rent an EV. Yeah.
That'll be
buy an EV, take the bus, take a bike, walk, buy a heat pump. You know, don't give them any more money. They don't need it. They don't want it. They can go retire and take their billions with them. That's all I got to say about that. Bloomberg headline: electric vehicle sales top $1 trillion in wake-up call for car makers. Now, alarm bells are going off and ringing at manufacturers that have been reluctant to ditch combustion. Well, who would that be? Hello, Toyota. Good morning in Japan. How are you today? Long development cycles also mean that if an automaker has been caught wrong-footed, like you, Toyota, it can take quite a while to realize the full impact of mistakes. The $1 trillion EV sales mark is probably the point where it becomes clear that some automakers have made the wrong bets, i.e. everyone in Japan. Now, I'm reading here from Bloomberg. Japanese automakers illustrate this well. All of the Japanese brands combined sold less than 5% of the EVs purchased globally last year, and none were among the top 10 EV brands by volume. This wasn't a problem in 2019 when plug-in vehicles were just 2.6% of global auto sales, but it's worrisome when they're likely to be closer to 18% this year. And that, my friend, is why we have a new CEO at Toyota. They could have listened to our show, Brian.
Yeah.
3 years we've been doing this.
The show is free. It's free advice.
There's no charge. Nothing. They could have been listening. Why are we smarter than them? They're a multi-$100 billion company, and we know things that they don't. How is that possible?
It's very weird.
How? I can't pay my mortgage on time, it seems. You know? I only had one Christmas tree this year. And yet...
Wait.
How many do you normally have?
Do you normally have?
I tried to go to 2. Just because.
Hey, speaking of Canadian news, you know Sandy Monroe, the guy on YouTube who breaks down automobiles?
The consultant for the auto industry.
He's also Canadian. I just found that out.
What? Sandy Monroe's Canadian. He talks with a Chicago accent.
From Windsor, Ontario. So maybe it's a Detroit kind of area accent.
Yeah, Detroit, Windsor, right across the river. A lot of people in Windsor work in the United States. They just go right across over the bridge with a little pass and work
That's
there.
allowed?
That's allowed. Nurses,
Okay.
auto workers, yeah. They got a special deal for it. Don't know why. I don't live there. Well, it's time for the tweet of the week. The tweet of the week is a weekly tweet that I highlight from the Twitter, which everyone's complaining today that Elon Musk is in their follow you page or for you page, right?
He was showing up.
He's
often.
inserting himself
Yeah.
on it. Like, he's just gone mad. I'm sorry. I don't want to talk about it. I know you don't want to talk about it either, but he's gone mad. I've banned him. I've blocked him, and now he's not anywhere. So this is from Brandalism, like vandalism, but brand as in advertising. Brandalism UK, at Brandalism UK. They did a campaign, an anarchistic-like campaign, of, well, I'll read the tweet for you. Subvertising teams across Europe have taken aim at Toyota and BMW for misleading advertisements and anti-climate lobbying, which we know them to do. 400 car billboards have been hacked and replaced in 14 cities in Europe and Australia. So Toyota has an ad on a billboard. These guys take their own ad and put it over top.
Nice.
And I've put the pictures of some of them here. Let's Ruin Everything. It has a happy Toyota ad and a poop emoji mountain in the background and a bunch of skulls. Another one on a bus says, Mr. Toyota says, screw the climate. And it's got a Mr. Toyota with a smiling evilly with black blood coming out of his eyeball sockets. And that's on your local bus somewhere in Europe. And another one, which is my favorite here. This is a billboard with a normal advertisement for Toyota, which gloats beyond Toyota's Beyond Zero means. And it's sort of cut in half. And the right half is not so sunny. It's all smoggy and dirty and end of the world like. Beyond Zero actually means flogging gas guzzlers for decades to come. So ban fossil fuel ads. That, ladies and gentlemen, is my tweet of the week. And now, Brian, what time is it? What time is it?
It's time.
Can you guess?
For my addendum to that story.
Okay. Not what I was thinking?
No, I was just going to say it reminds me of Adbusters magazine, which I used to read back in the day, back in the 90s. That was a lot of fun reading Adbusters magazine that was, advocating this type of activism using, advertising kind of techniques. And I learned something from reading Adbusters, which is, and they're kind of against all advertising. It's not just picking on particular topics, but, advertising, it's a bit of a pollution that we have to live with in a sense. But I learned from Adbusters magazine that they said that you can sometimes turn off the lights on billboards. So often billboards are lit up at night, right? Like you need lights on the billboard. And they said, regulations in certain places mean you have to have a light switch for them in an easy to reach place. And I tried this out one time when I was living in Toronto. I was like, hey, I wonder if I can turn off the lights on that billboard. And I walked over and I did it. It totally worked.
Did you turn it back on?
No, I didn't.
Really? You rebel.
I'm a total rebel.
Okay. Is there anyone knocking on your door to arrest you right now? This isn't live. It kind of feels live, but it's not live.
Okay.
It's a little bit
And now it's time for
the lightning round. Yes. It is time for our weekly look at the news and clean energy and climate. Fast-paced as it is how we end the show every week. Brian, a game-changing discovery of around 6 million tons of lithium in India, making it the world's 6th largest reserve of lithium.
Wow, that's important.
And people keep saying, no lithium in the world, not enough lithium. My son's engineering teacher, not enough lithium in the world. Well, this is like, boom.
Yeah.
That much more here. Boom, that much more there. You just weren't looking for it.
I assume it'll take a while to develop the resource, but...
Sure. But we have it. We found it. It's there. It's the 6th largest reserve. And you know what? India needs that lithium. They need to make a lot of electrification to take that smog out of the air and clean things up. And yeah, they're going to need as much batteries as anybody. Recent modeling from Clean Energy Canada found that a domestic EV battery supply chain could support up to 250,000 jobs by 2030 and add $48 billion to the Canadian economy annually. This is domestic EV battery supply chain, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's not wind turbines,
Yep.
it's not solar, it's not anything but that.
No.
But
Canada
batteries.
has all the elements for EV batteries, and we got to do it.
I believe that's more than all the oil and gas jobs in Canada right now.
Yeah, I would assume.
And so that's we're constantly hearing about that, and there's memes going around. My son showed me something the other day, the memes he gets served on Twitter about oil and gas, whining about pipelines not getting built. Well, they've had record profits. The oil and gas industry went way up in profits last few years. There's been no touching of it at all by policy, so it's bull.
But even though the profits have been going up, the number of people they employ has been going down.
True.
Because of efficiencies over the years. They don't need as many people.
And they've learned how to make more money, and by God, they're going to keep it because they know it's going away. From Clean Technica, Michigan scores the $3.5 billion Ford battery factory from Virginia, who didn't want it.
Wow.
They were associating the LFP batteries with China. They didn't want anything to do with China. So they lost a $3.5 billion factory to Michigan because it was up between Michigan and Virginia. It's time for a CES Fast Fact. Chinese automakers delivered about 97,700 battery electric vehicles in Western Europe in 2022, according to AutoSchmidt. That's over 6% of all the battery electric vehicles sold in Europe last year. Didn't hear that coming. All of a sudden, it said 6%. That's a tipping point. Remember how tipping points work.
6% just from China.
Look out, Chinese. Automakers are coming. Their cars are better than most people think. There's nothing wrong with them. They're compelling, and they may be a little bit cheaper. So 15, this is I can't even read this without laughing. There were 15,427 fuel cell passenger vehicles sold in 2022.
Yeah, so these are hydrogen fuel cell vehicles.
You know the ones that Toyota and Honda said were the future and not battery electric?
Yeah.
Well, guess how that compares to 2021? 5 less vehicles than 2021. Have we peaked? Yes, we have. It is plateaued. That is a plateau, Brian, if I've ever seen one. And down it goes from there. So, yeah, the Hyundai Nexo was 11,000. They sold the most. And Toyota Mirai was only 4,000 in the United States.
Yeah, and both of those figures are higher than I thought they would be.
Another CES Fast Fact. Jobs in renewable energy globally, 2021, 12.7 million jobs in renewable energy. The projection is for 42 million. That's plus almost 30 million, okay, in 2050, by the time we reach net zero globally. Now, last year, jobs in oil, gas, and coal were 10.7 million. That's less than renewable energy already.
Already less than renewables.
And in 2050, the projection is for oil, gas, and coal to be down 8.5 million jobs to just 2.5. So compare 2.5 with 42 and do the math on that one. In Maine, 116,000 out of 600,000 new homes now have a heat pump. So that's not new homes now have a heat pump. How about that?
Yeah.
How about that?
They're more popular in certain places, and
Maine's a good place.
Maine's a good place.
And it's because a lot of they had heating oil, right? They're replacing it with heating oil, so it's a big improvement and a good motivation to do that. And finally this week, offshore oil and gas operations, methane gas may be crashing helicopters. They make them fall out of the air. So on offshore rigs, there's more methane leaking than the onshore ones, apparently. And they're studying this, and of course the oil companies are denying it. A growing body of evidence warns methane pollution from offshore oil and gas operations could be far greater than official statistics suggest and can even cause helicopters to fly out of the sky, says DeSmog. Invisible and odorless, even low levels of methane can cause helicopters' engines to fail. The Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, a division of the DOI, they had efforts to require methane detectors on aircraft over offshore oil and gas operations, but they were shot down, figuratively speaking, by the oil and gas industry in 2017. Well, there was a helicopter loss not that long ago with 4 people just gone. And they suspect that was the case. Not to end on a downer, Brian, but that is our time for this week. That's our show. The podcast is now over. It is concluded. And by God, it was a good one. It's a very vigorous show. I'm tired today. I'm tired. So I had to really, plow through this one with some fake energy. Take the time to contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. We love to hear from you. Peter sent us some mail today. Great to hear from him. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel. Maybe you're on YouTube right now. Hello, YouTube. I'm waving at you for special features and all kinds of other things, including the show in visual form. Speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow is how you can leave us a voicemail message, which we love. If you want to do something nice for us, that's how you do it. And if you're new to the show, remember to subscribe on your podcast app to get new episodes delivered every week, because by God, we do this every week, Brian, and we do a hell of a job doing it. And it too.
Sir.
See you next time.
See you next week.
Podcast.